The King's Avatar, Chapter 1306 What Makes Him Special, audio source, wushaworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1306, What Makes Him Special. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Cloud-grasping fist didn't have mountain-splitting power. When 1-inch Ash came over to block it, the chi landed upon his body and instantly pulled him toward where chaotic cloudy mountain was. This skill only pulled the target toward the user, it didn't restrict the target's movements. 1-inch Ash, who had purposely taken the attack to help Little Cold Hands, was of course prepared for this. As he was pulled away, he also sent an attack. Ghost Slash. The blade light arrived in front of chaotic cloudy mountain a second before the person did. But Lu Boyuan had seen that the opponent had taken the initiative to serve as a meat shield, so an attack like this was within his expectations. He dodged to the side with precise timing, already thrusting a hand toward 1-inch Ash's shoulder. Lu Boyuan had predicted Qiao Yifan's actions, but Qiao Yifan had actually also guessed that Lu Boyuan would respond. The problem was, chaotic cloudy mountain's hand had arrived in the last second before Cloud-grasping fist wore off. Cloud-grasping fist didn't restrict the character's skills, but movement was undoubtedly locked. Even though Qiao Yifan knew that chaotic cloudy mountain's attack would arrive, he simply had no way of controlling 1-inch Ash to dodge. Lu Boyuan's hand flashed out with incredible precision, and his positioning was beautiful. Helpless, Qiao Yifan tried to change the direction of his Ghost Slash, but he still couldn't catch up to chaotic cloudy mountain's movement. Qiao Yifan was already out of strategies, but fortunately, this wasn't an individual battle. A laser rifle was accurately fired toward chaotic cloudy mountain, forcibly splitting the connection he had tried to establish with 1-inch Ash. Even though it failed to cause any damage, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash had already recovered from the movement-restricting effects of the cloud-grasping fist. Moonlight Slash. Full Moonlight Slash. Two slashing attacks one after another instantly leapt toward chaotic cloudy mountain. The slashing attacks of a phantom demon didn't cause much damage, but Lu Boyuan of course wouldn't just let his character be chopped up. He quickly backed up 2 steps, avoiding these 2 attacks. 1-inch Ash quickly withdrew, as he had no intention of getting tangled with him here. Even though Happy hadn't taken too much damage for now, their formation had unquestionably been thrown into chaos by Samsara's continuous disruption. Over by Little Cold Hands, Dancing Rain's X1 extruder had already exploded, and one autumn leaf was rushing forward. Dancing Rain again tried to block him, but he didn't dodge or retreat. Over there, Fang Ming, who as Cleric Laughing Song was already casting, clearing covering for one autumn leaf as he forcibly killed off Little Cold Hands. Happy was now completely on the defensive, all starting from when Sun Xiang's one autumn leaf had broken through with a dragon breaks the ranks. Once upon a time, Samsara's weakness was their lack of a close-range, brute force attacker. But after obtaining Sun Xiang and one autumn leaf, they finally had a character who could charge through, forcibly carrying the whole team into the offensive. Samsara's weakness had been fixed with a transfer, but what about Happy's weakness? Right now, he was suffering under one autumn leaf's furious attacks, helplessly waiting for rescue by his teammates. It really is hard to understand Happy's actions. Pan Lin and Li Yibo, in the television broadcast, were discussing this topic instead of the events going on in the match. They'd originally thought that Happy had gone to all this effort to update Little Cold Hands' equipment because Wenyi had some special talent that would allow him to control this character very well. But just looking at this ongoing match, they couldn't tell. All they saw was, as usual, the weakness of Wenyi's slow reactions. And this weakness was directly causing trouble for Happy in this match. If he had used Sacred Fire a little faster to restrict one Autumn Leaf's movement space, then one Autumn Leaf's formation-breaking charge might not have been successful. If his reactions were a little faster, he should have been able to dodge that, shattering the lands. He shouldn't have been hit and then directly exposed in front of one Autumn Leaf. Now the whole team has lost the initiative. Team Happy's team roster here relies on the Phantom Demon's support and control to strengthen the battle ability of the whole team. So, as soon as the battle begins, they need to let the Phantom Demon successfully cast his boundaries. And the launcher is the core of long-distance attacks. In other words, Lord Grim and Boundless Sea are the only ones directly controlling the situation from the front. This arrangement requires the team's cleric to give a certain amount of support. And when Yi has failed to do this, and so Happy was quickly scattered by Samsara. The two continued to discuss and analyze the problems. And when Yi was the core of this heap of problems, the simple conclusion drawn was that if Happy changed their cleric player, even if it couldn't be said how the battle would ultimately play out, at least Happy wouldn't be so quickly broken by Samsara in a battle where they had the map advantage. Yes, broken. By this time, Happy had already been broken for good. The ghost boundaries hadn't been set. The healer had been stolen away and was being beaten up. Only under Dancing Rain's desperate supporting were Lord Grim and Boundless Sea able to struggle out of their situation and turn around to try and save the healer. But Samsara instantly turned fire, with Sun Xiang's one Autumn Leaf throwing away Little Cold Hands and attacking Lord Grim and Boundless Sea. Zhou Zekai's Cloud Piercer took over for him, continuing to rain damage upon Little Cold Hands. Inside-out tactics. One of the basic strategies in Glory. Close and long-range attackers exchange positions, continuously outputting damage. And now, inside-out tactics were being used by Sun Xiang and Zhou Zekai, these two pinnacle attackers in the alliance, with one Autumn Leaf and Cloud Piercer, these two pinnacle characters. One could only imagine how powerful it was. Because of the restriction caused by the inside-out exchange of these two players, Happy had no way of interrupting their offensive. Over the course of this season, Samsara had used this method to swiftly wipe out who knew how many crucial characters on the opponent's side. Even if it didn't succeed, this method greatly restrained the opponents, preventing their strategies from effectively playing out. The situation Happy faced now was even more disastrous. Their healer was directly kicked out of the match by the opponent. Happy lost, but no one expected that they could lose so quickly. 11 minutes and 58 seconds, that was how much time this team competition ultimately took. This was only a little over 2/5 of the average team competition duration of 25:47. Anyone could tell that this was a match where the healer was immediately killed off. Samsara's fans were jumping and laughing. Who cared if they lost the individual rounds? The ultimate victory still belonged to them. Happy's fans, meanwhile, were quiet. When they'd seen Tang Rou's performance in the group arena, when they'd seen Little Cold Hands flashing new silver equipment, they had held high hopes for this team competition. They truly felt that their team was about to defeat the champion team Samsara. But in the end, the team competition was such a swift and brutal defeat. And when Yi disappointed everyone. Although he had always been called Happy's weak point, thanks to the team's intentional protection with their strategies, he had never affected Happy's victory. But this time, it was exactly as Pan Lin and Li Yibo had analyzed. And when Yi's weak point left a gaping vulnerability in the match, and it was this vulnerability that led to Happy's rapid loss to Samsara. Just switch the cleric player. The supporters in the stadium, the supporters in front of the television, even Pan Lin and Li Yibo in the live broadcast were giving this suggestion to Happy. Increasing the character's strength won't help. The character is dead. The player is alive. You have to start from the player. Quote, at the end of this match broadcast, this was Lee Yibo's exclamation. In the post-match press conference, this issue became the focus. And Nwenyi, at the center of this whirlpool, hadn't been sent out by the team for this press conference. He sat in the prep room, silently staring at the television as Yishu was swarmed by the media, the reporters firing question after question about Nwenyi. WushAWorldAudio.com. Nwenyi took off his glasses and buried his face in his hands. He'd really screwed up this time, he knew. The team had built this cleric character just for him, a character specially catering to his playstyle, but his performance was still like this. It looked like he really wasn't suited to be a pro player. Everything he'd hoped for, dreamed of, they were no more than soap bubbles bursting in the air, right? Maybe this was the final chance the team would give him, and now they were probably going to find a new player. The transfer window still hadn't closed. Do you think Nwenyi is even at the professional level? Quote, Nwenyi had taken off his glasses, but he couldn't stop the sound from reaching his ears, and he heard from the television a reporter asking such a direct question. Unlike many commentaries where they tried to tactfully express that Nwenyi's skill wasn't good enough, this reporter bluntly questioned whether he had a chance as a pro player. Nwenyi wasn't the only one left in the prep room during the press conference. After hearing this brutally direct question, Qiao Yivan reflexively began searching for the remote to turn off the television. But then, they heard Yishu's clear and certain answer. Of course. Without a doubt. Qiao Yivan froze, and then slowly, the hand holding the remote slowly fell back to his side. He looked at Nwenyi, and saw that his teammate had lifted his head, a shocked expression on his face. But soon, he put his glasses back on and stared attentively at the television. Then how do you explain his performance today? There were several moments that I don't think were because of accidental mistakes or such reasons. They happened because he's not good enough, right? A reporter asked. No. Yishu shook his head with a smile. That was because he's only had this new character for 2 days. He needs to adjust to the character, and at the same time, he needs to adjust to a few responsibilities that he hasn't taken on before. Responsibilities that he hasn't taken on before. What is that referring to? Just like in today's battle, a cleric standing directly at the front of the battlefield, Yishu said. But he didn't do very well. This was his first time, and this was against Team Samsara. How well would you hope he'd do? Yishu asked. That is to say, Happy won't look for a new cleric player, and will continue to believe in him. Absolutely, Yishu said. What's so special about him, that Happy has such faith in him? Special. He is a member of Team Happy. That's what's special about him, Yishu said. A member of Team Happy. And when he stared blankly at the screen, when he once again doubted himself, when he once again lost confidence in the future, Yishu appeared in front of everyone and clearly emphasized his identity. He was a member of Team Happy. Was all of the faith just from that? And when he was extremely moved. But clearly, the reporters weren't touched by such an answer. To them, this was too idealistic, this was belief for the sake of belief. If and when he repeats his performance today, will you still say that statement? One reporter asked. I think that he won't give me that difficulty. Yishu said. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1307. The Buddhist Monk from a Foreign Land. Audio source, WushAWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1307. The Buddhist Monk from a Foreign Land. Translator, Noam Yummy. Editor, Noam Yummy. Yishu's declaration at the press conference didn't dispel many people's doubts. Stubbornly insisting on using someone who was universally regarded as having subpar skill, received all sorts of criticism. The forums, in particular, had lots of nonsense like and when Yi was Chen Guo's sugar daddy, and he could not be kicked because of the boss's authority. Numerous people actually accepted this conjecture, quite a few were even Happy's fans. Fortunately, the reporters weren't so unreasonable and only criticized Happy's obstinacy. Happy's future this season is looking quite good, but perhaps it will end because of their stubbornness. A few media stations reported in this way because the transfer window had closed after this round and Happy truly had no intentions of recruiting a better healer. And Wenyi was the only person they could rely on now. Healers were different from other classes. There were usually no substitutes for them. Cries of mourning could be heard all around Happy. Even many of Happy's supporters complained about their team's stubbornness. Rumors without boundaries started to spread further and further. The only voice that could thoroughly dispel these doubts was a strong performance, but don't be anxious. This isn't something that can be resolved in a match or two. Early in the morning, Yishu got up and found Wenyu practicing since who knew when. The entire team needs time to get used to this new way of playing. It wasn't just you that made mistakes against Samsara. The team didn't protect you well enough either. Yishu said, "You're not consoling me, are you?" Quote. And when you asked, "I always say it how it is," Yishu said, "I believe you." And when you nodded his head, Yishu was truthful to the extent that he could infuriate others. Continue to work on your reaction speed. It'll always be helpful. And then practice and play together with the team to work on our synergy. Yishu said, "Maybe we can go back to how we played in the past." Quote. And when Yi said these words, thinking with the team in mind, he was a bit scared of holding back the team from winning just so that he could become a qualified cleric. That style of play isn't sustainable. Even that slowly Yibo is starting to smell out the traps inside. Do you believe that the likes of Yuan Zhou, Zhang Xinjie, Wang Jieshi wouldn't be able to? We need to think about the long term. Starting from now on, we need to think about playoffs. Yishu said, "Playoffs? I don't think we'll decline so far as to fall out of top 8. Yishu said, "After round 20, the fluctuations on the rankings were minuscule. Only 4 teams had changes. Royal Style beat Radiant 7-3, and Miracle lost to Tyranny 1-9. As a result, 2 of these teams switched places on the rankings. At the moment, Royal Style was in 12th while Miracle was in 13th. Apart from that, there was Team 301 and Team Void. These 2 teams confronted each other directly. In the end, Team 301 won 9-1 versus Team Void. And in this match, the player Baishu, who Team 301 had dug out from who knows where during the transfer window, triggered quite a discussion. The unknown newcomer displayed extremely high technical skill, and what was even more astonishing was that he seemed to have plenty of competitive experience. A nobody having exceptional technique could perhaps be explained by bitter closed-door Trang, but rich competitive experience wasn't something that could be obtained in seclusion. The Glory online game couldn't bring about this sort of high-level experience either. Where did this Baishu come from? Finally, Team 301 gave the answer to this mystery by revealing his identity. This guy was also a pro player, but he wasn't a domestic player. He was a Chinese pro player from England's Glory Super League. This was foreign help. The pro circle was astonished. It obviously wasn't only China that had a Glory competitive scene. Glory was a popular global game, and many countries had formed their own leagues. It was just that up until now, each country had their own competitive formats. The scene was still young too, so there hadn't been any cross-border interactions yet. At most, it would just be a few videos of other pro matches appearing on the internet. The international scene had unfamiliar players, equipment descriptions that they couldn't understand, and it didn't offer anything that they couldn't see in their own country, so it naturally didn't have much of an impact. But this time, Team 301 officially broke the communication barrier and recruited a pro player from outside of the country. Baishu quickly received numerous interview invites from several media outlets. In the end, the one who came out on top was Esports Home, the country's highest authority in esports. Baishu's unknown history was finally revealed through the interview. There was nothing crazy about him. He had been a student studying abroad and liked to play Glory during his free time. He was quite talented, so his skill level quickly improved. After making a name for himself in the Glory community, he attracted the attention of pro teams and was recruited. He already had nearly 4 years of competitive experience. Team 301 expanded their search for talents to outside of the country and brought Baishu back to China. The Glory news reporters weren't as clueless towards the international scene like many normal players. England's Glory Super League had the highest level of competition in the European region, and Baishu had been a core member of one of the top teams there. His skill wouldn't lose to top player in China. From the results of the round 20 match, many people believed that Baishu was at an all-star level. These were just words, though. He need to prove it with action. How bad was Happy's and Wenyi? How good was 301's Baishu? For a moment, these two topics became the most popular topics in the Glory competitive scene, and a match that would put them to the test had finally arrived. Round 21. Happy had an away game against 100 Blossoms, while 301 had a home game against Tyranny. This time, there wasn't too much debate from the broadcast for which match to show. Team 301 versus Team Tyranny was picked. Everyone was very curious about this international player. Baishu's performance didn't disappoint. In their match against Tyranny, Team 301 won 8-2. Baishu's performance in the team competition was even more praiseworthy. In this match, Team 301's captain Yang Kong once again used life-risking strike to OHKO the opposing side's healer. Tyranny's healer was on a completely different level than Happy's and Wenyi though. And Wenyi was considered the Alliance's worst healer, while Zhang Xinjie was considered Glory's best healer. WuxiaWorldAudio.com. Zhang Xinjie had the experienced generals Han Wenqing, Zhang Jiali, and Lin Jingyan surrounding him, yet under Baishu's brilliant cover, Yang Kong was able to land a fatal blow. The monk from the foreign lands had quite the skill. On the other hand, the domestic healer looked quite shameful. Happy ended up losing to 100 Blossoms 4-6.
In the individual competition, Yishu once again stood undefeated.
Happy also won the group arena. However, in the team competition, their healer once again failed them, which led to their defeat. The dissatisfaction of the fans rose even higher. But apart from complaints about it, there was nothing else they could do. The transfer window had passed, so no matter how terrible and when you may be, Happy could only keep using him, unless they decided not to use a healer in the team. The gloomy Happy fans didn't lack passion, giving all sorts of advice to Happy, but no matter how it was spun, it always came back to asking Happy to switch healers. Enlightened by Team 301, their search started expanding outside of the Alliance. An unknown but enthusiastic fan had gathered numerous matches showcasing healers from the international scene and then sent all of them to Happy's public mailbox for Happy to survey. Chen Guo was helpless. She could only give another official team announcement expressing the team's faith in Wenyi. She also hoped the fans could understand and be patient for a better future. When the announcement came out, it persuaded a few, but there would always be stubborn fans. Happy's statement once again gave rise to all sorts of rumors. Possibilities such as Wenyi being the boss's sugar daddy was no longer enough to satisfy them. Including Happy's loss to Team 301 in round 19, this was their third consecutive loss. However, just like last time, the rankings barely changed at all. No one really cared whether Conquering Clouds and Radiant, the 17th and 18th place teams, moved up or down. The other change was Void, who lost to Thunderclap 3-7, being overtaken by Misty Rain, who 7-3 against Royal Style. However, these two teams were 20 points away from the playoffs zone. Apart from them, Team 301 was closing in onto the playoffs zone. After beating Happy in round 19, Bai Shu joined their team. Ever since that round, Happy had lost 3 in a row, while 301 had won 3 in a row. The distance between 301 and the 8th place Wind Howl had shrunk to 13 points. Team 301 looked to be making a strong comeback in the second half of the season. Their captain Yang Kong stepping back and their new player becoming a part of the main roster had changed Team 301's tactical style. Yang Kong seemed addicted to life-risking strike at the moment. Team 301 might just make it their main playstyle. As for Bai Shu, everyone was still very curious about how much more potential he had left to show. As for Happy's current predicament, besides their loyal fans, no one else truly worried for them. On the other hand, people like Ruan Cheng had found a gold mine. Their disgust towards Tang Ru had spread to the entirety of Team Happy. They couldn't find anything to criticize Tang Ru for at the moment, so they just brought her team into the mess. In the new issue of the Esports Time, Ruan Cheng attacked Happy ferociously. However, his timing was poor. In round 22, Happy would be facing Happy. For the current Happy, a small mishap like this wasn't enough to a team like Radiant to upset them. After 3 consecutive losses, Happy made a resounding comeback with a 10-0, a loud slap in the face to people like Ruan Cheng. Ruan Cheng wanted to cry but no tears came out. What could he do? Esports Time was released bi-weekly, so they couldn't publish immediate reports. When his article came out, round 22 had ended. Ruan Cheng's criticism towards Happy received all sorts of condemnation from the community due to Happy's 10-0 victory. Are you blind? Countless Happy fans cursed angrily at Esports Time, at Ruan Cheng. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1308 Tyranny's Home Stadium. Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1308, Tyranny's Home Stadium. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. After round 22, there were only small changes on the points ranking. Clearly, after half a season of accumulation, the various teams all had a solid point foundation, and it would be very difficult for the points of one round to cause any big shifts on the rankings. In the 3 rounds after the new year, the most eye-catching team was undoubtedly 301. None of 301's opponents these 3 rounds, Void, Tyranny, and 100 Blossoms, were weak. But 301 had still managed to win beautifully with the 9-1 and 2-8-2 victories. Bai Shu didn't disappoint all those curious about him and had a strong performance in all 3 matches. 301's captain Yang Kong had already completed his style change in these few rounds. He was no longer that directly attacking warrior assassin. Cold, ruthless, deadly. This was the impression that today's number 1 assassin in the Alliance gave everyone, and he did a better job than many other assassins who had always used this style. This sort of clean and neat style change led people to feel that this was a player who had always been somewhat underestimated. Even though 301 hadn't risen on the leaderboard after these consecutive victories against strong opponents, they were steadily closing the gap between themselves and the top 8. After this round, their opponent 100 Blossoms had fallen to 8th place with 131 points, only 8 points ahead of 301. The other team that was worth paying attention to was Team Wind Howl. Wind Howl, named the soft-footed shrimp, had really been beaten bloody by the strong teams during the first half of the season. 10-0, D by Happy, 9-1, D by Tiny Herb. That was the tragic ending they faced in the last 2 rounds of the first half. During the winter transfer window, they'd tried to invite Tyranny's Zhang Xinji with much fanfare. But ultimately they failed to make the deal, and they'd left behind a strong impression that they desperately need to adjust the team. If they wanted to make any acquisition after that, all of the teams were lions with jaws gaping wide. Any player could have an asking price over 10 million for them. Windhowl was quite desperate, but they weren't going to be taken for a ride like this. Zhang Xinji was a player that could truly take care of all their problems, a god, a popular player. They were willing to pay a sky-high price. But now any random player cost over 10 million. This was simply robbing a burning house. To Windhowl, these players were just spare tires. There was no way they'd make such a large investment. They were unwilling to be cheated, but they also couldn't discuss any suitable transfers. In the end, the transfer window closed without Windhowl being able to complete any discussions. They could only pretend they had everything together, sending out an announcement expressing the team's belief in the current roster, belief that their current strength was enough to win everything, and so on. Quite a few people who like drama all anticipated seeing Windhowl's continued fall. But at this moment, the match schedule helped out Windhowl. In the opening of the second half of the season, none of Windhowl's opponents were strong teams. Conquering clouds, radiant, lightly, in front of teams like this, the soft-footed shrimp could still bare its fangs and wave its claws, eating them one by one. After 100 Blossoms lost to 301, Windhowl reached 7th place. And coming up next, in round 23, Windhowl's opponent was Bright Green, a team that with Seaside was already locked in the relegation zone. It looked like Windhowl, for now, wouldn't be falling. Those paying attention to Windhowl were only interested in seeing results. The fans who truly enjoyed watching high skill and technique displayed during a match had quite a few high-level confrontations they could choose in round 23. Tyranny vs Happy, Blue Rain vs Samsara, and 301, who had found its momentum in the second half of the season, would be playing their away game against the team whose team competence style had completely changed this season, Thunderclap. After deliberating, the television broadcast team finally decided to give up on the match between the number 2 Blue Rain and the number 1 Samsara. Simply because the difference between Samsara and Blue Rain was a whole 22 points. Even if Blue Rain earned a ferocious 10-0 victory over Samsara, they still had no way of shaking Samsara's huge lead. After thinking of this kind of result, this match felt a lot less interesting. On the other hand, Tyranny and Happy were currently tied at 148 points, and their relative ranking was determined by the outcome of the previous match they'd played against each other. This time, whoever won would reach 4th place on the rankings. The higher the rank at the season's end, the more prize money and dividends the team could earn. It also had a bit of an effect on the playoffs. In the playoff system that had come into effect last season, the right of playing the home match in the third tie-breaking match between two teams was given to the team who had the higher ranking in the regular season. Even though this home match didn't include the right to choose the maps, the boost in morale from the home fans was useful. For the broadcast of round 23, they ultimately chose to show Happy's away game against Tyranny. February 21st. City Q. After the All-Star weekend, Team Happy once again arrived at this city. Tyranny's home stadium had actually sent a large bulk of security officers to welcome Team Happy. After half a season, Chen Guo had never seen such a welcome before. "Is this necessary?" Chen Guo said. "This is an official match, and the arriving person is Yi Xiu," the captain of the officers said in a very serious tone. But as he spoke, a coldness also seemed to flash in his eyes as he coolly glanced at Yi Xiu. His right hand seemed to subconscious drift toward the baton hanging at his hip. "The hatred is that bad?" Even though Chen Guo was an excellent Tira fan in the past, she had never followed the team to Tyranny's home stadium, and didn't know the atmosphere here. As soon as she asked this question, she suddenly heard a loud shout from somewhere. "Yishu, 1v1 me." And then a water bottle flew toward them, its cap very rudely opened, spilling water all over them. 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Quote, "This security officer's directions were like the directions given in a glory match. Immediately, people charged toward the 7 o'clock direction, seizing the target. As for what happened afterward, Happy's members didn't know. The target was tightly surrounded by security and swiftly escorted inside the stadium, all the way into the prep room." "How scary!" Chen Guo exclaimed with lingering fear. What if that hadn't been water? What if it was acid or something? Chen Guo examined where she'd been soaked by the water. Yishu was dumbfounded. Isn't that a bit too cruel? How bad is this hatred? Right after he said that, there came a knock on the door of the prep room. It was a very precise and rhythmic knocking, quite eerie. "Who is it?" Chen Guo was instantly on full alert. "Zhang Xinji," answered the person outside the door. Chen Guo hadn't expected that it was actually a god and quickly opened the door. "I heard that you all arrived, so I came to greet you." Zhang Xinji greeted everyone in the room, and Chen Guo quickly let him in. "Who's first from Tyranny in the individual round?" Yishu asked. This was a question that would very easily chill the atmosphere. But Zhang Xinji still responded. "You'll see when the battle starts." "Are you going in the group arena?" Yishu asked another question. "No," Zhang Xinji said. "Do you know how to have a conversation?" Chen Guo finally couldn't restrain herself any longer. "What is there to talk about?" Yishu retorted. Chen Guo was just about to answer, but Zhang Xinji actually agreed with Yishu's view. "Yes, I just came to greet you all. Play well, everyone. I'll take my leave now." Quote, after speaking, he just left. What? Chen Guo was so confused. There's nothing going on. He really came over purely to greet us? Was he trying to strengthen his sense of existence or something? WuxRWorldAudio.com. Then I'll go strengthen mine too. Yishu stood up. "Do you need me to go too, boss?" Steamed Bun jumped up. "Up to you." Yishu didn't care either way. "Let's go." Steamed Bun followed him. Me too, me too." Fang Rui also joined the excitement. "Boring." Wei Chen expressed his disdain toward these guys. The others were all more rule-following, and naturally didn't go along with this fun. The three left the room. The prep rooms of two teams were generally either directly opposite or next door to each other, so it wasn't long before Chen Guo heard the hallway sounding with Yishu's voice. "Open up, I'm here." With that tone, it sounded like this was his own home, and he couldn't be any more familiar. The door to Tyranny's prep room opened. Without invitation, Yishu just walked right in, followed by two others. "The host team's prep room is always nicer," Yishu exclaimed. "What's the temperature here? Ours is a little cold." Quote, after saying this, he saw the control for the air conditioning on the wall and very skillfully controlled it a bit. "Why are you here?" Standing to the side, Han Wenqing asked. Reciprocating the greeting, Yishu said, "Old Lin." Fang Rui also greeted his old partner Lin Jingyan. The number one brawler Lin Jingyan. Steamed Bun shouted. Lin Jingyan was instantly very happy. It had been a long time since anyone had given him that title. This inexplicable guy from Happy was very good at chatting, it seemed. Happy's idiots are already here. Quote, at this time, the door to the prep room was pushed open again, and a person charged in. Talking about people behind their back, where's your professionalism? Yishu turned around. The person who had just entered was Zhang Jiale. "Oh, you're here." Zhang Jiale acted like he had nothing to do with it. "You were the one who threw that water bottle just now, weren't you?" Yishu said. "What water bottle?" Zhang Jiale was confused. "Don't pretend. I saw that throw style. It was completely like a grenade you'd throw." Yishu said. "What's all this nonsense?" Zhang Jiale said. "I'll teach you a lesson during the match." Quote, as Yishu spoke, he headed outside. "Teach you a lesson." Quote, as Steamed Bun left the room, he also gave Zhang Jiale an aggressive and intimidating shout. "Those guys in Happy. They're really confusing." Zhang Jiale watched as these two people left. "Did you really throw that water bottle?" Even Tyranny's own members were asking him. Evidently, even though this thing had only happened just earlier, the news had already spread to Tyranny's players. "I'm not that childish," Zhang Jiale said. "But was it only water? How come they didn't put in a drink or paint or something? Let those guys from Happy go on stage all bright and colorful, huh? How bad is this hatred?" Someone exclaimed. "Gah." Zhang Jiale jumped. "There's another one. There was always another one." Lin Jingyan was speechless. Fang Rui had come over to chat with him, so when Zhang Jiale had come in, he'd only seen Yishu and Steamed Buns, and didn't notice that Happy still had another member waiting in ambush. "If you come to Happy again, there might be drinks or paint or something waiting for you," Fang Rui said to Zhang Jiale. "How bad is this hatred?" Zhang Jiale said. "Who said it wasn't?" Fang Rui laughed. "See you." Quote, he said his goodbyes toward everyone and then left. "Damn. Next time we go, we really have to be careful. Happy's dirty and shameless. They'd definitely do something like that," Zhang Jiale said, after Fang Rui left. "Why is it so cold in here?" Quote, after saying this, Zhang Jiale felt the temperature in the room, and then saw the air conditioning control on the wall. 18 degrees. "Are you guys crazy?" Zhang Jiale shouted. It was probably Yishu. Everyone remembered how Yishu had been fiddling with the control earlier. Just like I said, those guys can do anything," Zhang Jiale said. TN 18 degrees Celsius, about 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Soft-footed shrimp coward, weakling. End chapter.